Dr. Marcus Wright stared at the emergency alert flashing red across his computer screen. The message was simple but terrifying. 3 planets had vanished from the Kepler 442 system in less than 6 hours. Not destroyed, not exploded. Simply gone. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes and read the report again. He had been working at Nexus Prime Research Station for 2 years now, studying alien life forms from across the galaxy. In all that time, he had never seen anything like this. The station commander's voice echoed through the halls. All department heads to the main briefing room. Emergency Protocol 7 is now active. Marcus grabbed his tablet and hurried down the corridor. Other scientists and officers were moving quickly in the same direction. Their faces showed the same mix of confusion and worry that Marcus felt. The briefing room was packed when Marcus arrived. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the front, her expression grim. Behind her, a large screen showed the Kepler 442 system. Where 3 planets should have been, there was only empty space. "Ladies and gentlemen," Commander Chen began, "we have a situation unlike anything in recorded galactic history. At 800 hours this morning, our deep space monitors detected massive energy readings from the Kepler system. By 1400 hours, 3 inhabited planets had completely disappeared." A Vulcan scientist near the front raised his hand. "Commander, what do you mean by disappeared? Surely they were destroyed by some weapon." Chen shook her head. "That's what we thought at first, but the energy signatures don't match any known weapon. The planets weren't blown apart. They were consumed, absorbed, and something is still there. Something big." The screen changed to show a strange crystalline structure floating where the planets used to be. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. The crystal seemed to pulse with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. "We're calling it the Apex Paradox," Chen continued. "It appears to be some kind of living entity, and according to our readings, it's still growing." Marcus felt his stomach drop. A living thing that could eat entire planets was beyond anything science had prepared them for. Around him, other scientists were whispering nervously. A Zephyrian officer spoke up. "Has contact been attempted with this entity?" "Yes," Chen replied. "The Galactic Council sent 3 ships to investigate. 2 made it close enough to take detailed scans before retreating. The 3rd ship..." She paused. "The 3rd ship got too close. It was absorbed just like the planets." The room fell silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Chen activated another screen. "This is the last transmission from Captain Vorkul's ship before it was consumed." The recording was fuzzy and filled with static. A reptilian face appeared on screen, eyes wide with terror. "The entity is not attacking us," the captain said. "It's pulling us in, but slowly. Our hull is being broken down at the molecular level, but we're still conscious, still aware. It's like being digested while still alive. The entity seems to be searching for something. It's hungry, but not for matter or energy. It wants something. Else something we cannot..." The transmission cut to static. Marcus felt sick. The idea of being slowly dissolved while remaining conscious was worse than any nightmare. But something in the captain's words caught his attention. "Commander," Marcus said, raising his hand. "The captain said the entity was searching for something. Do we have any idea what?" Chen looked at him with approval. "That's exactly what we need to find out, Dr. Wright. The Council has declared the system a quarantine zone, but they want answers. They want to know if this thing will stop with one system or keep moving through the galaxy." A human captain near the back of the room stood up. Marcus recognized her as Lisa Rodriguez from the exploration vessel Endeavor. She was known throughout the fleet for taking on missions others considered impossible. "Commander Chen," Rodriguez said, "my crew and I volunteer to investigate further. The Endeavor has the best sensor equipment in the fleet. If there are answers to be found, we'll find them." Several alien officers turned to stare at her. A Centaurian shook his head. "Captain Rodriguez, with respect, this entity has already consumed 3 planets and a council ship. What makes you think you can succeed where others have failed?" Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Because humans have a talent for surviving things that should kill us, and because sometimes the impossible just needs a different approach." Marcus found himself standing up. "Commander, I request permission to join Captain Rodriguez's mission. As a xenobiologist, I might be able to understand this entity's behavior patterns. Chen looked between them. Dr. Wright, this is extremely dangerous. We don't know if this thing can be reasoned with or if it's simply a cosmic predator. That's exactly why we need to study it, Marcus replied. If it really is searching for something specific, maybe we can figure out what that is. Maybe we can find a way to satisfy its hunger without it destroying more worlds. The room erupted in discussion. Some officers thought the idea was madness. Others argued that they had to try something before the entity moved to another system. Commander, Chen raised her hand for silence. I'll contact the Galactic Council. If they approve the mission, you have my support. But I want full sensor records transmitted back to Nexus Prime every 6 hours. At the first sign that you're in immediate danger, you retreat. Understood? Rodriguez nodded. Understood, Commander. As the briefing ended and people began to file out, Marcus felt a mix of fear and excitement. He had spent his career studying alien life forms, but nothing had prepared him for something like the Apex Paradox, an entity that could consume entire planets yet seemed to be searching for something specific. Back in his lab, Marcus began reviewing all available data on the entity. The energy readings were unlike anything in the scientific database. The crystalline structure seemed to exist in normal space, but there were readings that suggested it extended into dimensions that current science couldn't fully understand. What struck Marcus most was the pattern of the entity's consumption. It hadn't attacked randomly. The 3 planets it had absorbed were all inhabited by different species with different technologies. It was almost as if the entity was testing them, searching for something that none of them possessed. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. Dr. Wright, please report to Docking Bay 7. We launch in 2 hours. Marcus gathered his research equipment and headed for the docking bay. He didn't know what they would find in the Kepler system, but he was certain of one thing. The Apex Paradox was more than just a predator. It was something far more complex and potentially far more dangerous. As the Endeavor prepared to depart, Marcus wondered if humans really did have some special quality that other species lacked. Something that might help them succeed where others had failed. Soon they would find out. The Endeavor dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Commander Jake Thompson stood on the bridge, watching the main screen with growing unease. Where a vibrant solar system should have been, only empty space surrounded, a massive crystalline entity that pulsed with unnatural light. My God, whispered Dr. Amanda Foster, the ship's theoretical physicist. The readings are off the charts. That thing is generating energy patterns I've never seen before. Marcus Wright studied his sensor data carefully. The Apex Paradox was even larger than the reports had suggested. It stretched across millions of kilometers, its crystal surface reflecting starlight in ways that seemed to bend reality itself. Captain Rodriguez, Thompson called to the ship's commander. What's our approach plan? Lisa Rodriguez moved to the center of the bridge. We follow standard first contact protocols, send mathematical sequences, prime numbers, basic universal constants. If this thing is intelligent, it should recognize the patterns. Lieutenant Emily Carter at the communications station nodded. Beginning transmission of mathematical sequences now, Captain. The crew waited in tense silence. Minutes passed with no response from the entity. Then the sensors began screaming warnings. Captain, shouted Ensign Ryan Miller from the engineering station. 3 council ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're moving directly toward the entity. On the screen, 3 sleek vessels appeared. Marcus recognized them as Advanced Centaurian, cruisers each carrying a crew of over 200 beings. Rodriguez opened a communication channel. Council ships, this is Captain Rodriguez of the human vessel Endeavor. Please respond. A cold voice came through the speakers. This is Admiral Corvex of the Council Fleet. We are here to contain this threat. All civilian vessels must withdraw immediately. Admiral, we have authorization from the Galactic Council to study this entity, Rodriguez replied. Perhaps we should coordinate our efforts. There is nothing to study, Corvex responded harshly. This creature has already consumed 3 worlds. It must be destroyed before it spreads. Marcus watched in horror as the Council ships powered up their weapons. Energy beams lanced out toward the apex paradox. The weapons hit the crystalline surface and simply disappeared, absorbed without any visible effect. Then the entity responded. The apex paradox began to glow brighter. Tendrils of crystalline matter reached out toward the Council ships like hungry fingers. The lead ship tried to retreat, but it was already too late. "Admiral Corvex, get your ships out of there," Rodriguez shouted. But the tendrils were faster than the fleeing ships. They wrapped around the first cruiser like liquid crystal, and Marcus watched in fascination and terror as the ship began to dissolve. Not explode or break apart, but actually dissolve at the molecular level. Over the radio came screams and confused voices. "The hull is breaking down, but we're still alive. The entity is keeping us conscious while it takes us apart. It's studying us, learning from us." 2 more ships were caught. The dissolution process was slow and methodical. Marcus realized the entity wasn't just consuming them for energy or matter. It was taking them apart piece by piece, examining every component, every thought, every memory. "It's not random destruction," Marcus said suddenly. "Look at the pattern. The entity is being careful, preserving the crew's consciousness during the process. It's trying to understand them." Dr. Foster was reading her instruments frantically. "The energy signatures are incredible. This thing exists partially in normal space but extends into dimensions we can barely detect. It's not just consuming matter and energy. It's consuming information itself." The last Council ship managed to escape, badly damaged. Admiral Corvex's voice was shaken when he contacted them again. "All ships retreat to minimum safe distance. We need to report this to the Council immediately." As the surviving ship limped away, Rodriguez turned to her crew. "We're staying. Something that advanced deserves more than just fear and weapons." Thompson looked worried. "Captain, we just watched 3 ships get consumed. What makes us think we can do any better?" "Because we're not trying to destroy it," Rodriguez replied. "We're trying to understand it." Marcus was studying the data from the attack. "Captain, I think I'm seeing something important. The entity didn't attack until the Council ships fired first. It was responding to aggression, not initiating it." Dr. Foster nodded excitedly. "And look at these readings. During the consumption process, the entity's energy patterns changed. It was learning from each species it absorbed. Their knowledge, their thoughts, their entire way of understanding reality. So it's not just hungry for matter," Marcus concluded. "It's hungry for information, for knowledge, for new ways of thinking." Rodriguez walked to the communication station. "Carter, stop transmitting mathematical sequences. Try something different." "Different how, Captain?" "Try transmitting human music, art, poetry. Something that shows how humans think and feel, not just how we calculate." The alien crew members looked confused, but Carter began uploading files from the ship's cultural database. Classical music, from Earth, paintings, poems, stories of human achievement and dreams. The response was immediate and startling. The apex paradox stopped pulsing. Its crystalline surface began to change, creating new patterns that seemed to mirror the rhythm of the music. Colors flowed across its surface in ways that matched the emotional content of the art they were transmitting. "It's responding," whispered Dr. Foster. "But not to the logical content. It's responding to the emotional patterns, the creative elements." Marcus felt his heart racing. Every species that entity has encountered probably approached it with logic, mathematics, scientific method. But what if that's not what it needs? What if it's starving for something that pure logic can't provide? Ryan Miller looked up from his engineering station. "Sir, the entity is generating new frequencies. They're complex, but they seem to be trying to match our transmission patterns." On the main screen, the apex paradox began to create new crystal formations. They served no obvious function, but they were beautiful, artistic, creative in ways that defied explanation. "It's trying to communicate," Marcus said with growing excitement. "But not through math or science. It's trying to communicate through art, through creativity, through imagination." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Then let's give it something to really think about. Carter, Transmit every piece of human creative work we have. Music, art, literature, films. Show it what it means to be human. As the endeavor continued transmitting humanity's creative heritage, the apex paradox began to change more rapidly. Its crystalline structure was evolving, creating forms that were both beautiful and impossible. For the first time since arriving in the system, Marcus felt hope instead of fear. Maybe humans really did have something unique to offer. Maybe their ability to create meaning where none existed before was exactly what this ancient entity had been searching for among the stars. Dr. Amanda Foster had not slept in 36 hours. Her eyes burned as she stared at the data flowing across her screens. The patterns were impossible, defying every law of physics she had ever learned. Yet somehow, they were real. "Marcus, you need to see this," she called across the lab to Dr. Wright, who was hunched over his own research station. Marcus looked up from his biological analysis charts. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but his expression remained alert and focused. "What did you find?" Amanda pointed to a complex energy graph on her main monitor. "The entity isn't actually consuming physical matter the way we thought. Look at these readings from when it absorbed the council ships." Marcus moved to her station and studied the display. The energy patterns showed something extraordinary. During each consumption event, the apex paradox had broken down matter at the quantum level, but it had done something else too. "These spikes here," Amanda continued, pointing to unusual readings. "They correspond exactly to moments when the absorbed crews were thinking creatively, solving problems, or experiencing strong emotions. The entity was feeding on their thoughts, their ideas, their capacity for imagination." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. So it really is hungry for consciousness itself. But why? What could an entity that advanced possibly need from organic minds? Before Amanda could answer, the intercom crackled to life. "All senior staff to the observation deck," came Captain Rodriguez's voice. "We have a situation." Marcus and Amanda hurried through the ship's corridors. They found the rest of the senior staff gathered around the main viewing port, staring out at the apex paradox. The entity had changed dramatically since their last observation. Where before it had been a solid crystalline mass, now it was creating new structures constantly. Delicate spires grew and dissolved in moments. Complex geometric patterns formed and reformed across its surface. It was like watching someone having a vivid dream made of living crystal. "It started about an hour ago," reported Lieutenant Emily Carter. "Right after we transmitted the complete works of human literature. The entity has been creating these formations non-stop." Dr. Nicole Davis, the ship's cultural anthropologist, was taking detailed recordings. She was young for her position, but her knowledge of human mythology and folklore had already proven valuable on several missions. "Captain," Nicole said slowly, "I think I recognize what we're seeing. These patterns, this behavior, it reminds me of stories from ancient Earth cultures." Rodriguez turned to her. "What kind of stories?" Nicole pulled up images on her tablet, comparing them to the entity's formations. Myths about beings that fed on dreams, on stories, on the spark of creativity itself. Every human culture has tales of creatures that needed imagination to survive. What if those weren't just stories? What if they were based on encounters with entities like this one? Marcus felt pieces clicking together in his mind. Nicole might be right, think about it. Every species the entity has encountered would have approached it with logic, with scientific method, with practical solutions. But what if logic and science aren't what it needs? Commander Jake Thompson, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Are you suggesting this thing is literally starving for imagination?" "More than that," Amanda said, her excitement growing. "I think it's starving for the ability to imagine new possibilities. Look at my energy readings again. The entity shows massive activity when exposed to human creativity, but the patterns suggest it can't generate that kind of thinking on its own." Engineer Ryan Miller, who had been monitoring the entity's transmissions, looked up from his station. "The signals it's sending back to us are getting more complex, but they're all variations on what we've already sent it. It's like it can process and modify our ideas, but it can't create completely new ones. Nicole nodded eagerly. That fits the mythology perfectly. In the old stories, these entities were incredibly powerful, but needed mortals to dream new dreams. For them, they had vast knowledge but no spark of true creativity. Captain Rodriguez moved to the center of the group. So we're dealing with something that has consumed entire civilizations but can't come up with an original thought on its own? It's worse than that, Marcus said, studying his biological analysis data. Based on the patterns from the absorbed ships, I think this entity was once biological itself, maybe even a collective consciousness of some advanced species. But somewhere in their evolution, they lost the ability to truly create. Amanda pulled up a new set of readings. The quantum signatures support that theory. This thing exists partially outside normal space-time, in what I can only call conceptual dimensions. It has access to vast amounts of information, but information without the spark of imagination is just dead data. Thompson shook his head in amazement. So it's been traveling the galaxy, consuming entire worlds, desperately searching for species that can give it what it's lost. And every species it encountered was logical, practical, survival-focused, Nicole added. They could provide knowledge, technology, even complex problem-solving, but they couldn't provide the one thing it really needed, the ability to believe in impossible things and make them real through sheer force of imagination. Ryan looked up from his instruments. Captain, the entity is responding to our conversation. The signal patterns are changing again. On the viewing screen, the apex paradox was creating new formations. But these were different from before. Instead of merely modifying human artistic concepts, it seemed to be trying to combine them in new ways. A crystalline structure appeared that looked like a cross between a Gothic cathedral and a DNA helix. Beautiful and impossible. It's learning, whispered Marcus. Not just copying our ideas, but actually starting to build on them. Rodriguez made a decision that would change everything. Prepare a direct communication array. I want to try something that goes against every first contact protocol ever written. Thompson looked worried. Captain, what are you planning? I'm going to do what humans do best, Rodriguez replied with a determined smile. I'm going to take an impossible risk based on nothing but hope and intuition. If this entity is starving for imagination, then we're going to feed it the most human thing there is. Our stubborn belief that any problem can be solved if you just think about it differently enough. As the crew prepared for the most unprecedented, first contact attempt in galactic history, Marcus realized they were about to test whether humanity's greatest strength, their refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible, could save not just themselves, but an entity that had forgotten how to dream. Commander Jake Thompson stared at Captain Rodriguez in disbelief. Captain, you're talking about a direct neural link with an entity that just consumed 3 council ships. This goes against every safety protocol in the book. Rodriguez stood, firm at the center of the bridge. Sometimes the book doesn't have answers for situations like this. We need to take risks that other species won't take. Dr. Kevin Torres, the ship's neuroscientist, was already running calculations on his portable computer. He was a quiet man who usually stayed in his lab, but the current situation had brought him to the bridge. Theoretically, it might be possible. The entity's energy patterns suggest it can interface with biological neural networks without immediately destroying them. Marcus Wright felt his stomach tighten with worry. Kevin, theoretically and actually are 2 very different things. We saw what happened to those council crews. They remained conscious while being dissolved, but they were being consumed for study. Dr. Amanda Foster interrupted. The entity was learning from them. If we approach it as partners instead of subjects, the outcome might be completely different. Lieutenant Emily Carter looked up from her communication station. Captain, I volunteer to be the first test subject. My neural patterns are already synced with our communication systems. If anyone can establish a stable link, it's me. Thompson shook his head. Absolutely not. We're not risking crew members on a theory. But Captain Rodriguez was studying the readings from the apex paradox. The entity had continued creating new crystalline formations, each one more complex and beautiful than the last. It was clearly responding to their presence, their discussions, their very thoughts about the situation. The entity isn't trying to hurt us, Rodriguez said finally. Look at its behavior. It could have consumed us the moment we arrived, just like it did with the council ships. But it didn't. It's been patient, communicative, creative. That's not the behavior of a mindless predator. Dr. Torres pulled up a new set of data. I've been studying the neural patterns from the absorbed crews. The entity preserved their consciousness completely during the consumption process. It wasn't trying to cause suffering. It was trying to understand how their minds worked. Nicole Davis, who had been quietly observing the entity's formations, spoke up. In the old Earth myths, these kinds of beings formed partnerships with humans. They provided power and knowledge in exchange for creativity and imagination. What if that's what this entity is looking for? Not to consume us, but to work with us. Marcus considered the possibility. It would explain why the entity had been so responsive to human art and music. It wasn't just studying their creativity. It was hungry for partnership with beings who could imagine new possibilities. If we're going to try this, Torres said, we need to design a limited interface, something that allows communication without full neural integration, a bridge between human consciousness and the entity's conceptual dimensions. Rodriguez nodded. How long do you need? Give me 6 hours, Torres replied. I'll need to modify our standard neural interface equipment and create new safety protocols. As Torres hurried to his lab, the rest of the crew continued monitoring the entity. Over the following hours, the apex paradox seemed to sense their preparations. Its formations became more elaborate, creating structures that looked almost like welcoming gestures. When Torres returned, he carried a modified neural headset connected to the ship's main computer systems. This should allow limited consciousness, sharing without permanent integration. The subject will maintain their individual identity while temporarily accessing the entity's conceptual space. Lieutenant Carter stepped forward again. I'm ready, Captain. But Rodriguez shook her head. No, Carter. If we're doing this, I'm doing it. As captain, the risk is mine to take. Before anyone could object, Marcus Wright moved to the neural interface chair. Actually, Captain, I think it should be me. As a xenobiologist, I'm trained to understand alien thought patterns, and as the person who first suggested the entity was searching for something specific, I feel responsible for seeing this through. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood the risk Marcus was taking. If the neural link failed, he could be consumed, just like the council crews. But if it succeeded, they might finally understand what the apex paradox truly needed. Torres helped Marcus into the modified headset. Remember, the moment you feel the entity trying to absorb rather than communicate, we'll sever the connection immediately. Marcus nodded and closed his eyes. Torres activated the neural link. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond his physical body. He was suddenly aware of vast spaces that existed between normal dimensions, filled with infinite knowledge but devoid of the spark that made knowledge meaningful. And there, in the conceptual darkness, he felt the presence of the apex paradox. It was not one mind but millions, the collective consciousness of an entire species that had achieved perfect logical understanding of their universe. They had mapped every law of physics, solved every mathematical equation, understood the fundamental nature of reality itself. But in achieving perfect knowledge, they had lost something essential. They could no longer imagine anything that didn't already exist. They could no longer dream of possibilities beyond what logic dictated. They had become prisoners of their own infinite understanding. Through the neural link, Marcus shared his own memories, the excitement of scientific discovery, the joy of creating something beautiful for no practical reason, the hope that drove humans to attempt impossible things simply because they believed those things should be possible. The entity's response was like a wave of desperate gratitude. For the first time in eons, it was experiencing thoughts that went beyond pure logic. Through Marcus, it was remembering what it felt like to wonder, to hope, to imagine better futures. Marcus felt the entity's knowledge flowing into his mind, but filtered through human creativity rather than cold logic. Scientific principles became poetry. Mathematical equations became music. The fundamental forces of the universe became a canvas for infinite artistic expression. When Torres finally severed the neural link, Marcus opened his eyes to find the entire bridge crew staring at him in amazement. Through the viewing port, the apex paradox had transformed. Instead of consuming space around it, it was creating new forms of matter that had never existed before. Beautiful, impossible structures that served no purpose except to exist as expressions of newfound wonder. It worked, Marcus whispered, tears streaming down his face. It actually worked. The entity isn't hungry for destruction. It's hungry for partnership. It wants to create new things alongside us, to explore possibilities that pure logic alone could never reach. As the Endeavor crew watched in awe, the apex paradox began transmitting complex mathematical formulas. But these weren't cold equations. They were blueprints for technologies that married human intuition with cosmic knowledge, creating possibilities that neither species could have imagined alone. 3 weeks after first contact with the apex paradox, the Endeavor received an unexpected visitor. Admiral Robert Hayes materialized on the bridge in a shower of transporter light, accompanied by a full diplomatic escort and 2 squads of Galactic Council security forces. Captain Rodriguez met him with a polite but wary expression. "Admiral Hayes, this is an honor, though I wasn't expecting an inspection so soon." Hayes was a tall man with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had commanded Council fleets for over 20 years and was known for his practical, no-nonsense approach to galactic politics. "Captain Rodriguez," Hayes said formally, "I'm here to assess the situation with this entity you've been communicating with. The Council is deeply concerned about the implications of your success." Marcus Wright, who had been working at a nearby science station, looked up with surprise. "Concerned about our success? Admiral, we've managed to establish peaceful contact with a being that was destroying entire worlds. Shouldn't that be considered a victory?" Hayes turned to study Marcus with calculating eyes. "Dr. Wright, isn't it? The one who made direct neural contact with the entity. Tell me, what exactly did you experience during that connection?" Marcus exchanged glances with Captain Rodriguez, who nodded for him to proceed. "I experienced a collective consciousness that had achieved perfect logical understanding of the universe, but had lost the ability to create new ideas. They were starving for imagination, for the spark of creativity that drives innovation and hope. And now this entity has access to human imagination," Hayes said grimly. "Do you understand what that means for the balance of power in this galaxy?" Dr. Amanda Foster, who had been listening from her position at the science station, spoke up. "Admiral, with respect, the entity isn't interested in power or conquest. It's interested in creation, in exploring possibilities that pure logic can't reach." Hayes pulled out a data tablet and showed them classified Council reports. "Dr. Foster, in the 3 weeks since your contact, we've detected 17 separate anomalies throughout this sector. Phenomena that shouldn't exist according to known physics, all of them emanating from areas where this entity has been active." "Commander." Jake Thompson moved closer to examine the reports. "What kind of anomalies?" "Space-time distortions that allow faster-than-light travel without hyperspace engines," Hayes read from his list. "Matter that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Energy patterns that generate resources from what appears to be nothing. Technologies that work based on hope and intuition rather than scientific principles." Captain Rodriguez felt a chill of understanding. "The entity is sharing its knowledge with us, but filtered through human creativity. It's creating technologies that marry cosmic understanding with human imagination." "Exactly," Hayes said. "And while that might seem wonderful from a human perspective, it's terrifying from a galactic security standpoint. Other species have spent millions of years developing their technologies through careful scientific method. Now, humans suddenly have access to capabilities that make their most advanced systems look primitive." Lieutenant Emily Carter, who had been monitoring communications, reported new activity. "Captain, we're receiving transmissions from multiple Council worlds. It seems word of our success has spread throughout the galaxy." Hayes nodded grimly. "Some species view humans as heroes who solved an impossible problem. Others see you as a potential threat that has gained access to dangerous cosmic powers. and a few are demanding that the entity be destroyed before it can share any more of its knowledge with humanity. Marcus felt a surge of protective anger. Admiral, the entity isn't a weapon to be controlled or destroyed. It's a sentient being that was suffering from a kind of cosmic starvation. We found a way to help it, and in return, it's helping us explore new possibilities. That's exactly what worries the Council, Hayes replied. Dr. Wright, you've established a relationship with an entity that can manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. From their perspective, that makes humanity either the most valuable ally in the galaxy or the most dangerous threat, Dr. Torres, who had been quietly working on neural interface improvements, looked up from his station. Admiral, perhaps the solution isn't to fear this relationship, but to expand it. If other species could learn to approach problems with more creativity and imagination, they could benefit from similar partnerships. Hayes shook his head. Dr. Torres, most species have evolved beyond what they consider primitive emotional and creative responses. They view human imagination as a weakness, not a strength. They can't understand how illogical thinking could lead to practical results. Nicole Davis, who had been studying the entity's cultural transmissions, offered a different perspective. Admiral, maybe that's the real discovery here. For millions of years, galactic civilization has focused on logic, efficiency, and practical solutions. But what if that approach has limitations? What if some problems can only be solved by beings willing to believe in impossible things? Through the viewing port, they could see the apex paradox creating new structures. These weren't the chaotic formations of its early hunger, but deliberate constructions that served specific purposes. Crystalline arrays that could convert starlight into any form of matter. Geometric patterns that opened doorways to distant parts of the galaxy. Art that was also science, beauty that was also technology. Engineer Ryan Miller called out from his station. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Galactic Council headquarters. They want to establish a formal first contact protocol for entities like the Apex Paradox. Hayes smiled for the first time since arriving. That brings me to the real reason I'm here, Captain Rodriguez. The Council wants to establish a new division within human space operations. A department specifically designed to handle contact with phenomena that exist outside normal scientific understanding. What kind of phenomena? Rodriguez asked. The galaxy is full of things that most species have learned to avoid or destroy. Hayes explained. Entities that exist in conceptual space rather than physical reality. Technologies that work based on belief rather than engineering. Civilizations that operate on principles that contradict everything we think we know about how the universe works. Marcus felt excitement building in his chest. And you want humans to specialize in making contact with these impossible things? The evidence suggests that humans have a unique gift for this kind of work, Hayes replied. Your willingness to believe in possibilities that logic says shouldn't exist makes you ideal candidates for dealing with cosmic anomalies that other species can't even comprehend. Captain Rodriguez considered the implications. Admiral, are you offering us a chance to become the galaxy's specialists in dealing with the impossible? Hayes nodded. Captain, I'm offering humanity a role that no other species in the galaxy could fill. You would be responsible for making contact with entities and phenomena that exist beyond the boundaries of conventional science. Your mission would be to find ways to communicate with, understand, and when possible, help these cosmic anomalies. As the crew of the Endeavour looked out at the Apex Paradox, now peacefully creating new wonders among the stars, they realized they were witnessing the birth of a new era, an age where humanity's greatest strength wouldn't be their technology or their courage, but their stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The galaxy was full of wonders that logical species had dismissed as too dangerous or incomprehensible to approach. But humans had just proven that sometimes the impossible just needed someone willing to dream of better solutions. 6 months had passed since the first successful contact with the Apex Paradox. The former quarantine zone around Kepler 442 had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. The first human paradox collaborative research station. Dr. Marcus Wright stood on the observation deck of the massive new facility, watching construction crews work alongside crystalline formations that seemed to build themselves. The entity, which had chosen to call itself Infinite Curious, had proven to be the most cooperative research partner humanity had ever encountered. "The productivity reports are incredible," said Dr. Amanda Foster, joining Marcus at the viewing port. "We've made more breakthrough discoveries in 6 months than most species make in centuries." Marcus nodded, reviewing the data on his tablet. The new faster-than-light drive systems, the matter conversion technology, the dimensional storage units. Every project succeeds because we're combining human intuition with cosmic-level knowledge. Through the transparent walls, they could see the latest marvel: ships powered by crystalline drives that worked on principles no traditional physicist could explain. The drives operated by convincing local spacetime that faster-than-light travel was not just possible but perfectly natural. Engineer Ryan Miller approached them with excitement in his eyes. "Dr. Wright, you need to see the latest test results from the Impossible Engine project. We just successfully powered a transport ship using nothing but optimism and mathematical poetry." "Mathematical poetry?" Marcus asked with amusement. "Equations that describe reality not as it is but as it could be if we believed hard enough," Ryan explained. "Infinite Curious provided the cosmic framework, and our engineers provided the stubborn human refusal to accept limitations. The result is technology that shouldn't work, but absolutely does." Captain Lisa Rodriguez, now promoted to Admiral and Director of the new facility, joined their group. "Gentlemen, Dr. Foster, we have a situation. We're receiving visitors." On the main display screen, dozens of ships were approaching the station. But these weren't ordinary vessels. Some appeared to be made of living light. Others seemed to exist, partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. A few defied description completely. "What are they?" Marcus asked. "Other impossible entities," Rodriguez replied. "Word has spread throughout the galaxy about our success with Infinite Curious. These are beings that most species have learned to fear or avoid. They're coming here seeking contact with humans." Dr. Nicole Davis hurried over with her analysis. "Admiral, I'm reading at least 12 different types of cosmic anomalies. There's a collective of beings made of pure mathematics. A creature that seems to exist only in the spaces between thoughts. Something that appears to be a living philosophical concept." Commander Jake Thompson, now second in command of the station, looked concerned. "Admiral, are we equipped to handle contact with this many unknown entities?" Rodriguez smiled confidently. "Commander, we're about to find out what humans are really capable of when we put our minds to it." The first entity to make contact was the collective of mathematical beings. They communicated through equations that described emotional states, rather than physical properties. Dr. Torres, who had become the station's expert on impossible communication methods, established a dialogue using music that had been translated into numerical form. The living philosophical concept proved more challenging. It existed as pure idea made manifest, feeding on debates and discussions about the nature of existence. Nicole Davis spent hours in deep conversation with it about the meaning of hope, the value of dreams, and whether reality was improved by believing in impossible things. The creature that lived in the spaces between thoughts was perhaps the strangest of all. It could only be perceived when someone wasn't trying to observe it directly. Lieutenant Emily Carter, now promoted to communications specialist for anomalous entities, developed a technique of holding conversations while focused on something else entirely. Within weeks, the research station had become a hub for cosmic impossibilities. Entities that had wandered the galaxy alone for millions of years were forming partnerships with human researchers. Technologies were being developed that worked on principles of hope, creativity, and stubborn optimism rather than traditional physics. Admiral Robert Hayes arrived for his monthly inspection, accompanied by representatives from dozens of galactic species. Most came to observe in amazement, but a few still harbored concerns about humanity's growing influence over cosmic anomalies. "Admiral Rodriguez," Hayes said as they toured the facility, "the results here exceed every projection the Council made. You've essentially created a university for impossible sciences." They paused at a laboratory where human scientists were working with an entity made of crystallized time. The creature could show them glimpses of possible futures, and the humans were using those visions to develop technologies that would make those better futures more likely to occur. The applications are endless, Rodriguez explained. We're developing medical treatments based on convincing diseases that they don't want to exist. Agricultural systems that work by inspiring plants to grow beyond their normal limitations. Even diplomatic protocols for resolving conflicts by helping opposing sides imagine better solutions together. Hayes studied a report on his tablet. The economic implications alone are staggering. These new technologies are revolutionizing entire sectors of galactic civilization. Marcus, who had been appointed as Director of Paradox Relations, joined them at the observation deck. Admiral Hayes, we're just getting started. Every day brings new impossible entities seeking partnership with humans. It seems the galaxy is full of wonders that logical species dismissed as too dangerous to approach. But humans approach them anyway, Hayes observed with admiration and slight concern. Because we're too stubborn to accept that anything is truly impossible, Marcus replied with a grin. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the edge of known space. The message was being transmitted by an automated probe that had been exploring the galactic rim for over a decade. This is probe designation Alpha 7, came the mechanical voice. I have encountered an anomaly that requires immediate human attention. An entity has been detected that appears to be consuming the concept of distance itself. Entire star systems are becoming unreachable, not destroyed but simply removed from the possibility of being reached by any means. The bridge fell silent as they absorbed the implications. An entity that could consume distance would make interstellar travel impossible, effectively isolating every world in the galaxy. Estimated time until the anomaly reaches populated systems? Rodriguez asked. At current expansion rate, approximately 18 months, the probe replied. Hayes turned to Marcus with a mixture of hope and desperation. Dr. Wright, it looks like humanity has its next impossible challenge. Marcus studied the data from the probe, feeling the familiar mixture of fear and excitement that came with encountering something that defied all understanding. Admiral prepped the Endeavor for departure. If there's an entity out there that's consuming the very concept of distance, then we need to find it before the galaxy becomes permanently fractured. As the crew prepared for their most challenging mission yet, Infinite Curious created a new crystalline formation that seemed to pulse with encouragement. The entity had learned enough about human nature to know that they would never back down from an impossible challenge. Rodriguez looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, an anomaly was threatening to make the galaxy unreachable. But she also knew that humanity had become something unique among the stars. The species that specialized in solving problems that couldn't be solved, in believing in solutions that shouldn't exist, and in making friends with entities that other species considered impossible to understand. The message was simple: we need humans. And as always, humans would answer that call, armed with nothing but imagination, hope, and the stubborn belief that any problem could be solved if you just thought about it differently enough. The impossible had become humanity's specialty, and the galaxy was discovering that impossible problems just needed impossible solutions, provided by the one species crazy enough to believe that everything could be fixed with enough creativity and determination.